kingdom come, thy will be done.
Yitkadal, Yitkadash Shmei Rabbah, V'alma Divra Chirutei V'amlich Malchutei.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillah.
Our often repeated prayers,
Although we may be different,
Yet similar.
as we reach out to our Creator,
20 seconds.
we offer all praise.
And we seek forgiveness.
we ask for peace in our hearts, in our minds, and in our spirits.
10
Amen.
seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Everyone, and welcome to this session of the Three Wise Ones. My name is Imam Kareem Bashir. I am the Imam of the Islamic Center of Ewing and also the President of the Islamic Council of Greater Trenton. This time I'd like to just let my co-host also introduce themselves, and then we will bring to you our topic for today. So, Dr. Lang.
I'm Reverend Dr. Shellerine Lang. I serve as the National Guard Bureau Installation Chaplain in Arlington, Virginia. It is my honor to be a part of the Three Wise Ones.
Thank you.
My name is Rabbi Seth Rish. I'm the Rabbi of the New Shul of America, and I'm so pleased to be here with my co-host today.
Thank you very much. And as always, in my introduction, I would just like to say to everyone, Assalamu alaikum, which means may God's peace be unto you. Today, we're going to be having a discussion on a few different topics. But first of all, I'd just like to say that this past week or so, we had Father's Day.
Transparency, to be able to say how hard it is to be a father, how hard it is, not the joy of being a father, but being able to manage the emotions of their kids and their wives. Like he was saying, it's exhausting. And as a woman, I never think about how exhausting it is for a man to try and match a woman's way of thinking. Because we have just a different way of thinking. So I want to know from you two, is fathering easy? Like, is it easy to be a father? Is it difficult? I mean, you like pulling your hair out? Like, what is going on with all these emotional craziness?
Well, one thing I wanted to comment about, there was a line around the block at the shirt and tie store on Father's Day, and it was hard to get just a solid tie out of there. But I took a little detour and I went to the cigar store, and there was a line there too. But I hate to say it, with all the newfangled advances in society, half the people in the line on Father's Day at the cigar store were women. And so I just want to say that really brings it home to me, that there's a lot more to Father's Day than cigars and ties. But I think that's what we're here for today. So
yeah, but you know, also too, on Father's Day, sometimes a lot of the men, we get tools as well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a hidden message. Well, it's not really hidden, but subtle, that look, you need to do some work around here. I will say this, is that being a father is not easy, but it's developmental, and by that I mean is that as your children go through various stages of life in terms of their age, you just have to address it from different levels. You know, is there a little child, then they're a toddler, a preteen, teenage, and we know the teenage years. Oh my goodness! But nevertheless, and then as adults, because we always, we joke around sometimes and we say our grown children. We put the emphasis on it because you don't stop being a father. You really don't. But at the same time too, Dr. Lang, is that you mentioned about the subtlety of sometimes of Father's Day. Like personally myself, it doesn't really faze me. I mean, it's I just see Mother's Day as, I don't know if it's because of just the cultural impact, or either just something naturally within us. But I think myself as well as other people, we do see Mother's Day being a little bit more important to make sure that we recognize, the mothers and the hard job that they have. So for me, if I get something, fine. If I don't, but I'm going to make sure that the mother, the grandmother, et cetera, does get something. And also, Rabbi, you'll know what I'm talking about. If we don't do that, we're in trouble anyway.
That's for certain, by the way. But I was going to comment. I was thinking about what you were saying, Imam, that, where do we take our inspiration? Often we look back in time to, obviously our biblical tradition. And, I think back to the Exodus when Pharaoh, of Egypt separated the men and women and had, sent all the men out to the fields for hard labor and slavery. Right. And how hard it was to have families. And if you had a boy baby, the baby was thrown into the Nile. And this forced separation, at least in how we understand ourselves, this forced separation really forced the role of the mother to come to the forefront. And you can see that all the women in the Exodus are the ones who saved Moses and really support Moses and save the day, but still looking to a Moses figure to draw them out of the Egyptian slavery into a better place. And it's not by accident, retelling this to you, that in the Jewish tradition, we place, both spiritually and otherwise, we place a huge role on the mother. We say that you're Jewish if your mother was Jewish. Right. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters, but, in terms of carrying on the legacy from the Exodus and the slavery and the Sinai desert and onto the promised land, it was the mothers that we draw our inspiration from and draw our lineage all the way back. And we have that today. So it's true what you said earlier. Every day is Mother's Day, and that's what makes unique a day in which there's some, recognition. I like to think some thanks, some gratitude for being a father and still sticking around in light of the fact that Pharaoh is always with us. He's always with us.
Interesting. I have a question. So part of the clip that intrigued me the most about Will Smith and Kevin Hart's interaction was they talked about the emotional taxing that it is for men to have to manage the emotions of their kids. Like, both of them are saying that they're professionals and they know how to get things done. I'm going to make you great. I'm going to make you better. But then the other part of that is they have to care about how their kids feel, about their feelings. So has that been a challenge as a father to manage? I want you to be great. I want you to get the job done. But then I also have to think about your feelings.
That is a loaded question, because every time I want to be just a guy, I have to remember that when my children are standing there, they're my children, and I have to model for them what someday, not only so they recognize me as the head of the household, at least as the father head of the household, but I have to model for them because someday they're going to be, I have two boys, they're going to be men. And I have a daughter, and she's going to be a woman. She's going to be a mother, God willing, right? And I have to model for them the appropriate, I don't want to say stance, but the way to be.
Yes.
And I have to keep that in mind because I want them to be a success. But I don't want to put too much on their shoulders that they can't attain that. So I have to be, I'm sorry to be so kind of, superficial, but I have to be real. Yeah, but I have to remember who I am. When I made a decision to be a father in a family, when I made that decision, I had extra responsibilities for the next generation of my own.
Yes.
That is a very difficult, and as I said at the beginning, kind of a loaded question.
Yeah. Well, but I agree with you, Rabbi. But like in my religion, we use that term in Islam. The proper really word is deen, and it has a lot of different meanings or connotations, but in simplicity, it's a way of life. So with my children, as they're growing up and also as adults, I try to show them to be a religious person, but that religious person is not like one day out the week. It's incorporated in everything that we do.
Bingo. Yes.
Exactly. So I
Yes.
think that's important. And I think it has a lasting effect. So you try to show, especially your boys, you want to show them how to be a man in all aspects. But also, let me just say this, and before we go to our break, is that there was one of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad of over 1400 years ago, peace be upon him, came to him and said, who should I give most of my attention to or allegiance to? And he replied, your mother. So they said, well, who next? He says, your mother. He says, well, who next? Your mother. He says, well, who next? He says, your father. So even in that, the prophet placed the importance of the children coming up in terms of them giving the respect and the allegiance and all of that to the mother. So yes, I accept Father's Day and all of that. And for you fathers out there, don't beat me up. I'm not downplaying our role and responsibility, but even in knowing my role and responsibility, I still have to give a lot of respect to the mother. Yeah, without a doubt. So, so we're going to go to break. But after when we come back from break, we have a question. That is, are the Democrats going to kill the filibuster? I'm sorry. So we'll discuss that after the break in about 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Thank you very much.
Okay, we are on break.
You opened a small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the black community spent $1.5 trillion because the black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the black communities. Major brands target the black media, TV, and radio. That's why blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you gonna find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. May be able to get on our black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
We'll be back in 5 seconds.
You opened a small...
We will be back in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2.
You opened a...
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 50. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not approved.
Madam President.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Madam President, I want to be clear about what just happened on the Senate floor. Every single Senate Republican should not act. My colleagues, if senators 60 years ago held that the federal government should never intervene to protect voting rights, this body would have never passed the Voting Rights Act. The Republican leader uses the language and the logic of the Southern senators in the 60s who defended states' rights, and it is an indefensible position for any senator, let alone the minority leader, to hold. And yet that was the reason given for why Republicans voted in lockstep today. Regardless of what may be happening in some states, there's no rationale for federal intervention. That is ridiculous and awful. All we wanted to do here on the floor was to bring up the issue of voting rights and debate how to combat these vicious, oftentimes discriminatory voting restrictions. And today, every single Democratic senator stood together in the fight to protect the right to vote in America. The Democratic Party in the Senate will always stand united to defend our democracy. I spoke with President Biden earlier this afternoon as well. He has been unshakable in his support of S1, and I want to thank the President and the Vice President for their efforts. Go ahead.
That video spoke volumes. I was already upset, and now I'm more upset by just listening to it again. Everyone in this country should stand up against the Republicans who will not even take a vote to bring up the issue of voting rights. How can that be? Just a discussion. Dear people, this is ridiculous, and it brings back memories of the early days in the 50s and the 60s of blocking civil rights legislation. What do you think?
I think this really has to do with power and control, right? Because if you keep people from their inalienable right to vote, right? They didn't think that black folk would come together in this kind of a way to change the course of history, right? So if they realize that as a people, we have the numbers, right? Because they always call us the minority. They always call us the minority. But the minority got with another minority who got with another minority, and we became the majority. And so when you have had a stronghold on power for that long, you're not going to let it go. You're not going to go quietly into the night. You're going to do what you can to block it. And what's amazing to me is that they're so bold about how they're doing it. And everybody's saying it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I sometimes, you know, look, we all come from a religious tradition, and that's really my only lens right now. Even though we all, you know, like every American, we're interested in the political sphere, right? But we come from religious tradition. So I think back in time, how did things change whenever they did change? And the wheels of history move, oh my gosh, so slowly. And I you know, look, I'm famous for bringing up the past, you know, and I look back into the biblical tradition, and look, it took someone to confront the king of Egypt to make changes. One man. And so I think back to Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend Doctor. And I think what he had to do, he was in a jail cell, and he wrote a letter from a Birmingham jail to whom? He didn't write it to Pharaoh, and he didn't write it to the president. He didn't write it to the Congress. He wrote it to his fellow religious and spiritual leaders, asking them, I think indicting them, but he was so careful, saying, where are you? You're telling me that the wheels move slowly and you're working behind the scenes? The scenes demand right now our work. That's what we need. And I don't know where Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King is these days. But I think looking back in history, we need the man. More important to be equal, we need somebody.
Yeah, we need someone. We do need someone, but we also need Dr. King within our own souls.
Yes.
To express that. Now, in my tradition too, is a famous saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he says, if you see an injustice, if you see something that's wrong, then change it with action. If you can't change it with action, then try to change it with your speech. And if you can't even do that, then at least feel bad about it in your hearts. So my question is, how many of us actually feel bad about this? How many of us actually feel disturbed about this? And my guess is, unfortunately, a lot of people will hear this, and even though it exemplifies a small group of people preventing black and brown people from gaining power, that so many of us will not even be fazed by.
You know what
and that's
you know what amazes me, that we had such a cry out from the white evangelicals when the previous administration was in office about all the things that were being restored, all the things that were religious, all the things that were spiritual, right? But they co-signed racism. They co-signed egomaniac. They co-signed narcissism. But I noticed there's nobody talking right now. Like, where are they? So that just goes back to, Rabbi, when you said we wrote to the religious leaders. But I think faith is relative. And so why do I say faith is relative? Because the master was still going to church. Right. The master was still reading the Bible while they was raping women and tearing families apart. The master was still serving God while he had Jim Crow in place.
Well, that calls into question.
The master was still saying that he was serving God. And so these people who are trying to prevent an equal access to voting rights, they still think they're religious. And so, I mean, so it's relative.
Before the Civil War, the abolitionists and the slavers, they all were going to church, and they were all quoting the Bible, and they were all raping the women, and they were all beating, their slaves, and they were separating families at the selling block. They were selling down the river. They were doing everything, all thumping their Bibles, all saying, "Oh, it's here." But you know what the Imam just said? It's not just here in our Bible. It's here in our heart, and the Imam added to it, it's also here in our legs. Yeah. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched with King, for us, he's such an example. He marched alongside the King. He was criticized by people. Why aren't you in the synagogue praying to the Almighty? That's your job as a rabbi. What are you doing with the Reverend Doctor? They didn't even call him the Reverend Doctor. You know what they call him. What are you doing marching there? And he said, you want to know? Well, you know what I'm doing? You want me to pray in the synagogue right now? I'm down here praying with my feet. That's what I'm doing. And that's, Imam, you are right on. It's come a time when people should be reading that letter from the Birmingham. The people who are called, they are called to spiritual endeavors. Where are they? Sitting under their own fig and their vine tree, their fig tree and their vine, thinking, oh, the world is getting back to normal now that we've got this power. We're not giving up. You know what? What's spiritual? Pick yourselves up. Do you remember that? Do you remember the Poor People's March back in the 60s where Bobby Kennedy said, come on down. Come on down. Where are these people saying that now? And where are the people who should be standing up and marching? That's what I want to know.
I think people have a short attention span. I think that we have created an environment where if it's not right in your face, if it's not flashy, if it's not shiny, if it's not gory, if it's not somebody getting a knee on their neck, if it's not all of that, then people go back to life as usual. So now that the masks have come off and nobody's died, well, there's still people dying from COVID, but it's not like in your face every day on the news. They're not really paying attention. So now people have this assumption that things have gone back to normal. The challenge is what is normal for one person is abnormal for another. So now because you don't see the George Floyd trial, now you forget that black folks are still being killed. Now you forget that you should still wear your mask. Now you forget that voting rights are serious. So people just have a short attention span. And if
well, just remember one thing: how did George Floyd get? How did we all come to the attention? Because one person took a video standing there.
Yeah.
And the Imam said a picture's worth 1,000 words. He said that. I'll tell you, that video was worth 1,000,000 things. But here's where we fall short, Imam. That video changed some things. It certainly changed the trial, but it didn't change the landscape. It did not change the landscape, because here we are 50-50, as you said, and you were right on. They can't even vote on having a conversation? Are you? I'm going to speak spiritually right now. Are you kidding me?
Hey, listen, if I'm correct, I believe in the last 7 elections, the Republicans did not get the popular vote, even though they've had some situations where they got their president in, but they did not get the popular vote. So these Republicans, and especially in the Senate, they see the writing is on the wall. This is the browning of America, as it says. Yeah. And so they've pretty much given up on us, people like us. They've pretty much given up on us. Now they are devising or coming up with plans that just, in all simplicity, to cheat, to do what they can do to get their point across. Even things like gerrymandering and things that they know they can't get the popular vote, so they're doing all these other things. But man, listen, just to take a vote to discuss something.
I mean, but it makes sense, Imam. It makes sense. Like, look at how everything's going crazy about critical race theory. So it's not that critical race theory is a lie. They just don't want people to know about it. But the more you say don't study critical race theory, more people Googling, what is critical race theory? Yeah. What is going on in this country?
I don't know if you heard that. Did you hear that? Anyway. Did you hear that interview with Obama very recently? And Obama said, we've got this problem, we've got this problem, but all of a sudden, he says the thing that most disturbs these people, these Fox News types and whoever they are in the right wing of whatever, he said, who knew? Right, about critical race theory. He said, who knew that's the big issue? Critical race theory. I love that expression. Who knew? It's almost a Yiddish expression. That's how beautiful it was. Who knew?
Who
that's
knew?
The big thing.
That would be the game changer.
All of the things that they are bringing up as some of the talking heads on TV say, is cultural or racial things. They're not even dealing with policies. But with this, I mean, I just hope and pray to God that people just wake up and say, look, are you kidding, Rabbi? Are you kidding me? You mean our senators won't even take a vote in the affirmative to discuss voting rights? Or I mean, come on. I mean, oh, man. So we definitely got to.
Well, I mean, that's the MO, though. Isn't that how they've always kept black folks silent? They won't even bring it up. They won't even bring it to the table. You're fighting for your right, but they won't even bring it to the court. So, I mean, silence for them is golden, but it's going to take, honestly, it's going to take white people to wake up and stand up for black people in order for it to change. Same way.
Okay,
it's the white who.
So, wait, this is my point, Doctor. This is my point. Here we are. We represent diverse religious communities. And here we are. By the way, Imam, we're able to talk to each other. We're diverse. They can't even talk, and they're all the same in the Senate, believe me. So here we are. We're diverse, and we're able to talk about these things. Yeah. And it's painful for I think for each one of us in our own way. This is painful, but we three come at this from a spiritual background. So what now? How do we define spiritual? If we can't define it on the basis of the Bible thumpers, antebellum. All right? Because everyone's thumping their Bible. Everyone's reading, quoting chapter. Everyone. If we can't define it on biblical verse, so how do we now define faith? We three. Well, I'll tell you how I define faith, and maybe you'll share with me. I define faith when we recognize that each one of us is created in the image of the Almighty. All right? That's how that I recognize that you two and me and everyone we know, we're all created in the image of God. And we all deserve not just a place at the table, a seat at the table, but we deserve dignity. We deserve respect. We deserve to be able to join hands in the faith and in the face, both, when we confront this type of bigotry and hatred and ripping families apart and treating people like less than anything you can imagine. We have to define faith as a priority.
Rabbi, I hear what you're saying, but that almighty dollar
The big one.
is a game changer. So
follow
with
the
the
money
mistakes,
trail.
we got to go to break. But that almighty dollar, that is not. They're not going to let go of that almighty dollar.
Yeah.
You know,
He said
Dr. Lang, I'm
follow-
prepared to
follow-
share. I'm prepared to share my dollar with you.
Listen, I got.
But only
we,
you.
We got to go to
Only
break.
you.
We got to go to break. And then, like, look, I'm hyped up. There's a lot of things I have to say, but we have to go to break. So listen, think about this during the break. What do we and the Dems have to do next in terms of moving this forward? Okay, see you in 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
Okay, we are.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
Yitkadal, Yitkadash Shmei Rabbah, the Alma Divra Chirute, the Amich Machute.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله.
Our often repeated prayers,
Although we may be different,
yet similar.
as we reach out to our Creator,
we offer all praise.
And we seek forgiveness.
we ask for peace in our hearts, in our minds, and in our spirits. Amen.
Ten seconds to go. 10 seconds. Okay.
You opened a small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the black community spent $1.5 trillion because the black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities,
1 minute and 30
19
seconds.
days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the black communities. Major brands target the black media, TV, and radio. That's why blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us
20
about
seconds.
your business. May be able to get on our black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Five seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
For such a bill.
Dr. Martin Luther King way back in 1963.
I think the tragedy is that we have a Congress with a Senate that has a minority of misguided senators who will use the filibuster to keep the majority of people from even voting.
Talking about the filibuster. Yes, the filibuster.
They won't let the majority of senators vote. And certainly they wouldn't want the majority of people to vote because they know they do not represent the majority of the American people. In fact, they represent in their own states a very small minority.
Remember Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech? I mean, who couldn't, right? King proclaimed part of his world-renowned speech was to protest the filibuster.
I think there will be, I'm sure, filibuster, and we will definitely protest this. We will lobby in Washington seeking to get congressmen, senators to stand up in a very firm, forthright manner with a determination to see this bill through. We plan to have a march on Washington on the 28th of August, at which time we will take a stand, letting the nation and the world know that we are determined to see civil rights legislation.
And yet, even as the death of George Floyd led to a seismic shift in understanding the plight our fellow Americans go through for being not white in this country, the attention these athletes put on civil rights, 58 years after King made his remarks, the filibuster is still intact.
There was so much hope, so much optimism after the March on Washington.
And the John Lewis Voting Rights Act still unsigned, which makes the stances of two Democrat senators puzzling. Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema and West Virginia's Joe Manchin are in direct opposition to ending the filibuster and securing voting rights throughout the country. As the great researcher Resist Programming found, they talk a big game and pretend to give a damn about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy by tweeting of said legacy. Yet here they are, as Resist puts it, upholding the filibuster used to block voting rights. Senator Joe Manchin said he does not support the For the People Act on Sunday. The bill, known as H.R. 1 and S1, calls for sweeping election reform, including restrictions to partisan gerrymandering in congressional districts, greater transparency in campaign financing, and an expansion of early and absentee voting. Ari Berman and Mother Jones gave us the insight. Manchin is fueled by dark money group Heritage Action for America, led by director Jessica Anderson, seen here. She bragged in a leaked video presentation of her influence with Republican lawmakers and how they actually draft legislation for these politicians to pass to restrict voting rights. On her own accord, she brought up Brian Kemp in the state of Georgia, which included 8 key provisions she and her group put in the bill. With Heritage's help, Anderson said, Georgia became the example for the rest of the country. Hans Van Spakovsky, seen here, is another major player at Heritage. He's a former Bush admin official who has one goal: restrict access to the ballot. Mother Jones reported Heritage.
Wow.
That was ridiculous.
Yeah, eye-opening for a lot of people who do not follow politics and keep up with current events. But also, too, I think it was just really, amazing when we can go back in history and listen to the words of Dr. Martin Luther King and then bring those same words into what's happening today. And as an African American, it upsets me sometimes when I'm listening to the news and some of these right-wing or ultra-conservative people or racists, they always want to quote Dr. King but take it out of context. How dare you? So look, we still got to ask, what is it that we need to do relative to the filibuster?
Right? Because you can say, call your senator, you can put the ads up, but you got to get to where the people are, So now you got a lot of people who think that, everything's fine. Trump is no longer in office. Everything is cool now. And they've taken their feet off the gas. And so how do we become relevant again without somebody having to die, without somebody having to be arrested? How do we stay relevant, so the younger people or the people who just think, that's somebody else's problem would re-engage. And so we have to figure out how to re-engage people in this fight.
Well, I was trying to think, recently, what makes, Manson, what makes him tick? Where's he coming? I was trying to, I realize I'm at best an armchair viewer of these things, but, then someone, said, well, he's obviously looking for votes. And in his state, he could easily be voted out because it's a red state and he's a Democrat. So if that's the case, and that's as good as anything I can think of, if that's the case, then we really have to look to Abrams out of Georgia and say, we better start registering people to vote.
Absolutely.
And get them to vote and make it, look where I'm coming from, make it a religious, spiritual, ethical, moral vector force to do that. And to do anything like you can recite the Lord's Prayer all you want, but here's the new Lord's Prayer from my perspective. Vote.
Yes.
And if you want change, this is the only way. Stacy, get out there and get people to vote. Whatever you were, Stacy, there in Georgia, now we need more of that. We need, and it's nothing's, this senator and that senator, they're teeter-tottering on the filibuster, or as the imam almost said, the kilibuster, all right? That needs to come to an end. Do I need to say it? It's Jim Crow embedded in our way of government, but it's not in the Constitution. It's unconstitutional. We need to vote. And that should be our spiritual priority, period.
But Rabbi, both you and Dr. Lang, we know in terms of the voting, when we look at West Virginia, what do you think would be a good move in terms of voting there? Because I've heard it said, well, if we don't keep Manchin there, then maybe a Republican will come in who's, really strong right wing. So sometimes it's kind of the hands off. I don't necessarily agree with that. What do you guys think?
I think about the fact that as a Democrat, he's in a Republican state, and right now he has a sense of power and authority to kind of sit with what comes in and what comes out. So he's the gatekeeper, and if he's no longer the gatekeeper, then all kinds of foolishness can happen. So it makes me think about just kind of in a parallel as a female chaplain. If I don't compromise in some areas, then my ability to manage that as the gatekeeper will be taken away. So then the question becomes, is it better for me to compromise in some areas and be the gatekeeper, or to say, you know what, this is wrong, and then they kick me out, and then I have no access?
I'm reminded in the biblical tradition when Moses goes back to Egypt, and the Israelites meet him there at the border, the elders, and they say, what are you doing? He's come back from living the good life. With the Midianites. He's had a great time with the Midianites. And he says, well, I'm here to I'm here to save the day, And they said, hey, just a minute, Moses. And this is Dr. Lang, you made me think of this. Just a minute, Moses. It's slavery, but it's not so bad. And Moses is bewildered. And it's the Lord God who says to him, no, I need this system ended. So I can't make an exact application here, but I can tell you this system needs to end. And if he needs to go and we need to wallow in the swamp, whatever that means now for us for a while, until we get someone, vote, put someone in there.
I think about that, Rabbi, wallowing in the swamp. But for those of us on the side of oppression, the people who can't take off the brown skin, to wallow in that swamp, it will be death to some of us.
Yeah.
And so then the question becomes, who is the collateral damage?
Right.
Who's the collateral damage? Because I think about Juneteenth, right? So now it's a federal holiday. Everybody has to acknowledge it. They don't have to like it, but they have to acknowledge it. And so now they can say, oh, we gave you a holiday. What more do you want?
Oh, we gave you a black president. I mean, come on, and then they blocked every single thing that he tried to do. But I think even with Manchin, I think that it's important that we put the spotlight on him. I mean, really put the spotlight, so people can see clearly, first of all, where the money's coming from, but also too, just the positions that he's taking and how it's against the development of freedom, justice, and equality for people who look like me. And so I think we need to do that. But and I think Dr. Lang had mentioned it earlier, is that we really need the Caucasian community to step up.
Letter from a Birmingham jail.
I'm going to say this, and I might get some pushback, but I'm speaking the truth. And that is that oftentimes when black and brown people say things, there's a certain segment that listens, and then there's another segment. Well, that's just them saying that. But when other ethnicities jump in the fray as well, then people listen a little bit more. So that element is really important.
Well, Imam, it's hard to play in the sandbox.
Let's go back to the almighty dollar. Because as long as you got a brown man who is a senator, who is a Republican, talking on behalf of supposedly all black people, saying that racism isn't real and this is not a racist country, if you got a pawn, if you got somebody who can be the face of what you want black people to say and do, you're always going to cause division. As long as you got brown people, like I think about like Cornel West and people like that, they had a lot to say when Obama was in office. He's not doing this and he's not doing that. But when Trump was in office, a hush fell over Jerusalem. Where were they? That almighty dollar, man, that'll keep people quiet.
Well, I just want to go. I appreciate that, Dr. Lang, what you're saying, but I just want to say this to the Imam as well, because thinking about this. But Imam, it's very hard to play in the sandbox when there's limited sand, and whatever bucket of sand and little pail you get, that means I don't get it. Whatever you take into your corner, but still, that's a zero-sum game. That's what's going on here. But still, I know, Imam, I know this as I know the sunrise tomorrow. Right? I have faith. I have the sunrise tomorrow. I know that if we work together, black, brown, or as I heard once at the inauguration, red, green, and yellow, and white. If we work together, we're going to move the ball down the field. And I know that's like, mom and apple pie stuff, but we need people who are going to, ready for this, elders of ancient Israel? We need people who are going to rock the apple cart. Yeah. And the apples are going to be real. And I'm sorry, Dr. Lang. I know when I'm talking, I'm white in appearance, right? I'm white, but I'm a Jew. And I know what happens when people are clinging on to power and they want to kill other people like me. I know that from my life, from my family, from my people, from my religion. I know that. And I may pass. But as God knows, as God is my witness, if they come for you and I turn away, next day they'll be coming for me and there'll be no one left. All right? I can never turn away. And that's why we need, just like in the state of Georgia, we have a black man and we have a Jew working together because they know sharing the sand in that sandbox is good for everybody. But Dr. Lang, you got to know, there are apples who are going to suffer. Just like those 3 young people back in the civil rights era, 2 Jews and a black man, they wound up dead in a clay dam. They knew the score. And I'm not advocating young people going out and getting killed. I'm not advocating that. But I'm telling you, if we just sit around, waiting, and maybe even like Dr. King writing those letters, if we just sit around, ain't nothing going to change.
You're right.
But I'll say this. I think a lot of it has to do with education. We were able to spark a lot of the young people over the summer in terms of, with the injustice and the killings taking place. But also, too, if we can take that same segment of the young people and begin to educate them and light that same type of fire in terms of the things that's taking place now, I think that it will go a long ways in terms of moving us forward. But I would like to say this, that we want to spotlight our children, and so we're going to watch another clip.